is a story I've just come across. I think this came out maybe a day or so ago. Maybe a day ago. I mean, I think this is relatively extremely recent. It's been just released or just been, I guess you can say, come out in the media that Vladimir Putin's Russian government has essentially sent troops, 100 troops and cargo, military cargo, to Caracas. Now, 2 planes in Caracas, 100 troops, 35 tons of equipment on a military diplomatic presence. Now, come on. Military diplomatic presence. Yeah, that may be true, but let's be honest. This is somewhat of a provocative action. I don't mean provocative necessarily in a bad sense, meaning they shouldn't be allowed to do this or they shouldn't do this. From, I would imagine, Russia's standpoint, they have few friends around the world and they want to support the friends that they do have. So having Guaido's government take over in this kind of coup, which is somewhat of an outright coup with some random guys given power in a country just because the United States wills it so, the moment that he takes power, he is going to sell off the resources of Venezuela, and Venezuela is going to be once again a client state. They do not have the best interests of Venezuela at heart, no matter how often they say this inauthentic term that they do. My point is this. They want to support the governments that support them. There's a long-standing relationship between Venezuela and Russia, and in this case, it seems like they are some level of support, even if it's somewhat of a show of support. The problem here, and I suspect that part of the problem is the military peel-off. Part of the reason that they're using sanctions in this way is to squeeze the government. They want to create such havoc and chaos within the society itself that it becomes almost chaotic, that its own revolution springs forth just based on the chaos. Part of the goal is also to create a peel away of the military, where you can get elements of the military that accepts, you can say, resources, gifts, whatever, from the United States, and in accepting this supports Guaido, creating this kind of civil war between Guaido and the Maduro government. They want chaos. They want to be able to pick over the bones of the chaos. Think Libya, think Iraq, think an attempt on Syria. But the key point here is, in that attempt on Syria, it was the Russian government that assisted in stabilizing the Syrian government. Otherwise, the United States would have also caused the collapse of that government. In the Venezuelan government, the troops that are there, 100 troops doesn't seem like a huge number of troops. But if you're talking about stabilizing the military itself, maybe. I mean, maybe you don't necessarily need 100 troops for this idea of fighting. Maybe you need 100 troops in order to stabilize the military, to show that there's the backing of a larger government that would assist you against the superpower that is trying to take your government and collapse your government. Like I said, provocative doesn't necessarily mean bad. The United States will bitch and moan and cry about it and everything else, but they're doing this because they don't want people to be able to defend themselves in any particular way. And having Russia's troops there creates somewhat of a problem if they're trying to create chaos, whether proxy client states, be it Colombia, Brazil, or whatever other client state the United States is using, to infiltrate troops into the country or infiltrate troublemakers into the country in order to create riots, chaos, setting people on fire, beating people up, injuring. And then when the Maduro government responds, it gives this kind of pretext that allows either proxy forces or the US military itself to intervene. To some degree, putting Russian troops in there, again, is somewhat of a bulwark even against those ideas and those plans. If anything, I would imagine that this shores up the Maduro's military. Despite Guaido saying that he has access to 80% of the military, there's no way to believe whether that's true or not. I suspect that he would say whatever he needs to say to try to get people on his side on this stuff. But regardless of what he says he has, there's 100 troops that have entered the country that is essentially working with the military. Provocative action by Russia. They're shoring up one of their supporters. You can't blame them, right? I mean, if you're looking out at the world and you see the United States takes down one government after the next that had some level of loyalties to you, where you guys had some kind of ties or tethers, And, you know, it's like, what do? Do you allow each of these governments to be taken down and you're looking at, you know, one less ally around the world? Or do you try to intervene to prevent the collapse of the government itself? I think you intervene, right? The United States has taken a certain posture. I end on this. The United States has taken a particular military posture that it's not going to allow any other powers that could check its power. Meaning this kind of unipolar power. It goes about the world and everyone else has to move in the wake of its, you know, its actions. The catch here is it is not a unipolar world. It is a multipolar world. And there are other powers in this world that may not necessarily have the military force of the United States, but definitely from an economic standpoint and from, let's say, united action standpoint, can intervene into these areas, clearly can intervene into these areas, and stabilize the situation, especially if the goal of the United States is not outright military interaction and the other place has the resources in order to, let's say, balance out what is taking place, especially at least up until the point of preventing the collapse of the government itself. The United States, of course, bitched about this, but Russia is seeing to their interests. So I will end this here. I thought the story was fascinating and terrifying, right? Like, can you imagine what happens if one of those Russian troops gets shot through some kind of proxy that the United States implements in trying to initiate, let's say, a next stage of regime change? Like, not to mention, they're rushing troops into a hemisphere that the United States has considered its own domain. 2 minutes to midnight. The nuclear clock is 2 minutes to midnight. I'll end it here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal page. Thanks all.